Right. Begin with the verse of the Kesa. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Now, yeah. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. I'll show you how to start on this one. Gata of Atonement. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. You got that? Yeah. Please stand for the incense offering. Your house. The fragrance of this incense invites the awakened mind to be present with us. The fragrance of this incense fills our room, fills our sacred space, guards our minds from wrong thinking. The fragrance of this incense unites us with virtue, mindfulness, and wisdom. We offer it on behalf of all beings. Be seated. Homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I go to the Buddha for refuge. Being one with the Buddha, I resolve to each day follow the way of life he laid down for us to walk and awaken to his supreme wisdom. I go to the Dharma for refuge. Being one with the Dharma, the gates of Dharma are manifold. I vow to enter them all. The goal of wisdom is ever beyond. I shall attain it. I go to the Sangha for refuge. Being one with the Sangha, in the spirit of universal fellowship, and as a member of the Sangha, I pledge to strive for the enlightenment of all beings. The Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace, and not conceited, contented, and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies, downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, sitting or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into the world of suffering. May I be happy and well. May no harm come to me. May I learn compassion. May all my friends, family, and those I love be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those troubled in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those who have hurt me in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those who I have hurt in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all my enemies be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all living beings be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. We'll do a 20-minute guided meditation tonight. Can you turn the lights down? Thank you. As the sound of the bell fades, just take a few deep breaths. And concentrate on letting your abdominals be nice and relaxed so your diaphragm can move freely. Your lungs can fill and empty completely, but naturally. And then let your breath settle into a comfortable rhythm. You don't need to breathe any special way, but be aware of your breath. Just know when you're breathing in, when you're breathing out. I think at this time, as we're starting to head into the holiday season, it's a good time to develop goodwill, to really work with that as a spiritual principle. So as you exhale, just let this phrase ride silently on your out breath, saying to yourself, may I be happy. May I be free from animosity. If any angry thoughts arise during the course of this meditation, just let them go. Give yourself freedom from anger, from ill will for this next 15 or 20 minutes. May I be free from stress and affliction. May I look after myself with ease. Now call to mind a loved one, whoever's closest to you, parent perhaps, or a teacher who's shown you a lot of kindness, maybe your child, someone whom when you think of them, your desire for their well-being arises naturally. And send them that thought, may they be happy. May they be well. And if you like, you can imagine your wish for their well-being extending out from your heart as a light or warmth, enfolding them in your goodwill. May they be happy. May they be well. And then call to mind a friend. Should be a good friend, someone you like. Maybe they've done you some favors, or they're just someone good to be with. Imagine them with you or think of their name and send them your wish for their happiness. May they be happy. May they be well. Bring to mind an acquaintance. Someone that maybe you don't know very well, or you neither like nor dislike. Feelings are fairly mutual toward them. You may not know much about them, but you know that they want to be happy. They want to be free from anger, free from stress. And so send them that wish. May they be happy. May they be well. Now call to mind someone that you don't like, someone you're having conflict with. If you're new to this, don't pick the person who's caused you the most pain in the world. Someone who's annoyed you or been rude to you or something like that will suffice. Think of them here with you and begin to send them your goodwill. May they be happy. May they be well. Notice any resistance to that idea that arises in your heart. Notice any animosity. If it's there, let it go. Recognize that difficult people are difficult because they're trying to be happy, trying not to suffer, not to have stress. And they may not be doing it skillfully. If they were happy and well, they probably wouldn't be difficult people. And if the feeling of goodwill doesn't arise for them, that's okay. Send them the thought anyway. In time, you'll develop that skill to greet even challenging people with kindness. And that's a great strength. May they be happy and well. And now send that thought to all beings. Imagine that you can radiate your light, your warmth to the east and west, the north and south, above and below. May all beings be happy and well. Think of someone that you'd like to help. Maybe there's somebody you know who's suffering. Call them to mind and send them the wish that they be free from suffering. And if you like, you can imagine that you're able to take in their stress, their difficulty into your heart, and with your compassion, transform it into freedom, into well-being. Using the thought, may they be free from suffering. And send that wish to all beings. May all beings be free from suffering. call to mind someone you know who's had some good fortune. It doesn't have to be a big deal if you don't know anyone who's had a major life event of a positive kind. It can be just someone that you know who has a roof over their head and 3 meals. Recognize this as good fortune and recognize good fortune as blessings. May they be blessed. Our blessings are the result of our good actions. May they appreciate their blessings. May all beings be blessed. May they enjoy their blessings. And we recognize that all beings are subject to their karma, experience good fortune and misfortune. Despite our goodwill, sometimes they won't be happy. Despite our compassion, they may suffer. All beings are the owners of their karma, the heirs to their karma. Born of karma, related by karma. Whatever actions we do, good or evil, we will inherit the results. Knowing this, be balanced, be at peace. The bell will ring twice to end the meditation. When it rings the second time, bring your hands together in front of your heart in Gasho. And then do a little bow, just acknowledging that you've spent this time developing these great spiritual strengths for yourself. Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, existing right here now, and reciting the sutras, hearing the Dharma, and training the mind, great merit is attained. We dedicate this merit to the great Master Shakyamuni Buddha, the all-pervading and everlasting three treasures, to the 16 guardians and all protectors of the Dharma and their relations throughout space and time, to all ancestors of the Sangha and all beings in the Dharma world. May penetrating light dispel the darkness of ignorance. Let all karma be resolved in the mind, flower, bloom, and eternal spring. May the Dharma body maintain strength and health, and years of life be lengthened for all teachers of this Sangha. Let their vows be fully realized, and may they live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma. We pray for the health and well-being of those suffering from diseases of body, mind, or spirit, those working toward the healing of those afflictions, and for the grieving. We pray for those suffering from violence, for all those living in oppression, for all who are imprisoned, for all refugees. May they be serene through all their troubles, and may we realize the enlightened way together. Sabbe sata sadahantu Avera Sukha Jivino Katang Punya Phalang Maham Sabe Bhagi Bhavantu Te. May all beings always live happily, free from animosity. May all share in the blessings springing from the good we have done. Can you turn the light back up? Hi. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at the prison, and one of the guys there, the one who's an ordained Zen monk, the only ordained Zen monk in the Florida correction system, we think, asked if I would talk about the Kalama, which he had encountered in a Zen setting. It's a sutra from the Pali Canon. And so I printed out a few copies and brought it in, and he looked at it and goes, "Oh, it's a lot bigger than I thought it was." And it's from the Pali Canon, but there are sort of abbreviated revisitations of it in different schools of Buddhism. And so we ended up having a really good conversation. And I thought, I don't think I've talked about that here in a very long time. And I'm pretty sure I haven't talked about it on any live stream. So now I will. Before I do, though, it's a couple of things I want to mention that are, before I forget them, that are just kind of interesting opportunities. So one is, those of you who listen to the Adventures in Buddhism podcast heard my interview with Yujiro Seki. Does that ring a bell with anybody? He's a Japanese filmmaker, and he made a movie called Carving the Divine. Yeah, that's all about these Japanese guys who do this wood carving of these amazing Buddha statues, and which is very old, hundreds, maybe thousands of years old, over 1,000-year-old art form and spiritual practice. It's really interesting. Well, anyway, he's started doing a crowd funding campaign, and so if you want information on that, I'll post something about it on the Facebook page and Facebook group. But I think for a relatively small amount of money, you can get to view the film online and stuff like that. Anyway, and I'd like to see him get his distribution deal gone so people can go to the theaters and see it. It's a very cool movie, I think. The other thing is that in a couple of weeks, the 14th, I think, Greg Creech starts his Nikon course. Some of you have worked with Nikon with me or elsewhere. Nikon is for those of you who don't know, it's a really transformational practice that actually arose out of Shin Buddhism. And he does an online course. You get a copy of his book. There's readings every day. There's some things you can post every day. It's a 30-day course. And they're offering it to us half price. And it's not very expensive to begin with. So I think the price, they just emailed me about this today. I think it was like $43 or something like that. So it's not a lot of money. So anyway, if you're interested in that, I'll be posting that stuff in the Facebook page. So I just wanted you to know it was there. Anyway, back to the Kalama Sutra. So the Kalamas were a group of people. It's a clan name, like Muni Buddha, the sage of the Sakyas. He was a Sakyan. These are the Kalamas. And so the Buddha was going around on this sort of walking tour of this part of India. And he stopped at outside of this village where the Kalamas lived. And so they heard that he was out there, and they had heard good things about him. That he had a reputation for being awake and then consummate in knowledge and conduct and all those kinds of things. And so they decided that they would go see him. And so they went out to where he was staying and bowed courteously, sat down, all those things that you did. And then they said, "Lord, there are some Brahmins and contemplatives who come to our town. They expound and glorify their own doctrines. But as for the doctrines of others, they deprecate them, revile them, show contempt for them, and disparage them. And then other Brahmins and contemplatives come to Kesaputta, where they live, and they expound and glorify their doctrines. But as for the doctrines of others, they deprecate them, revile them, show contempt for them, and disparage them. They leave us absolutely uncertain and in doubt which of these venerable Brahmins and contemplatives are speaking the truth and which ones are lying. So let me unpack that just a little bit. So Brahmins were the priests. They're the, what you would consider these days the Hindu priests. Hinduism wasn't quite what it was then, but what it is now back then. But basically they were the highest caste, and they were the ones who memorized the Vedas and recited them and all of that kind of stuff. Contemplatives were people like the Buddha, who went into homelessness and traveled around and did whatever practices they did, yogic type meditations and ascetic practices, and starving themselves and staring at the sun and standing on one leg, all those things, to try to awaken. And so they would often, many of them would adopt some doctrine or another that would be what they would teach. And so some kind of common ones was, there's a life after this one. There's reincarnation or something like that. Or the next guy would come by and say, no, there's nothing after this. It's there. They would be annihilationists. This is it. And when this life is up, it's up. And one would say, if you do something good in this life, it affects the next life. You do something evil in this life, it affects the next life. And the next one would say, well, it doesn't matter because there's not another life, so do whatever you want to do, and, no big deal. And then, or one would say, well, whatever you do in this life is okay because it's predetermined by your karma. You couldn't have done anything differently anyway. And so they were all saying these things that contradicted one another. And so these people would come out to get a spiritual teaching from somebody who's supposed to be awake. And, and they'd say, well, what I teach is right. What everybody else teaches is wrong. And then the next guy would say the same thing. So they're confused. And so the Buddha said, well, of course you're uncertain. Of course you're in doubt. And then he starts to talk about, how not to tell if something is true. He said, don't go by reports, by legends, by traditions, by scripture, by logical conjecture, by inference, by analogies, by agreement through pondering views, by probability, or by the thought, this contemplative is our teacher. So a lot of people read that far and then they stop, right? And this is one of the things that Doc, the Seto Zen monk, who's incarcerated, and I talked about, is that, that's kind of where he'd gotten with it in the past. You don't have to go by what people say, by legends, by, this guy's a teacher, therefore he knows what he's talking about, or this is what it says in the holy book and all of that. But the Buddha says, no, when you know for yourselves that these qualities are unskillful, these qualities are blameworthy, these qualities are criticized by the wise, these qualities, when adopted, lead to harm and suffering, then abandon them. So the Buddha is not saying ignore tradition. We do a lot of what we do out of tradition. It's tradition for a good reason. But that's not the only reason. That's not where it ends. You don't take something that's tradition and say, well, it's true because it's tradition. And the same thing with scripture. We've got the Pali Canon and the Sanskrit Canon and all of those kinds of, sutras and discourses and all that stuff have been maintained because there's value in them. But it's not enough just to hear or read it and then say, well, I'm a Buddhist and it's a Buddhist scripture, so it must be right. So you've got to realize it for yourself. Does this lead to something that is harmful? And if it does, let it go. Does it lead to something that's helpful? And if it does, develop it. So this isn't a license to be permissive or to not believe anything. It just says, don't just rely on that stuff. So then he goes on, he says, okay, so let's go a little deeper. How do we tell if something's harmful or not? And he says, what do you think, Calamus? When greed arises in a person, does it arise for their welfare or their harm? And the Calamus said, well, for harm. And he said, yeah, a greedy person overcome by greed, his mind possessed by greed, kills living beings, takes what is not given, goes after another person's wife, tells lies, induces others to do likewise. All of that is for their long-term harm and suffering. And they agreed with that. And then he says, well, what about when aversion arises in a person? Does it arise for their welfare or their harm? So he's talking about hatred, animosity, not just, I don't like liver and onions, therefore I'm not going to eat them. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking of people who make big changes in their life because they just don't like where they live, or they hate each other and have an aversion for their politics or their religion or whatever. He says, when that arises, does it arise for their welfare or for their harm? And they said, for harm. And he says, yes, this aversive person, overcome by aversion, his mind possessed by aversion, kills, steals, goes after somebody else's stuff, whatever, and lies and all that kind of stuff. And that's for their long-term harm. And then he says, what about delusion? When that arises, does it arise for welfare or for harm? And he says, for harm. So we're not talking about delusion in the sense of hearing voices or, seeing things that aren't there or whatever. We're talking about things like believing something because you want it to be true. We do a lot of that. It's kind of a tendency. Or deliberately avoiding facts because they're inconvenient, or thinking that something will lead to happiness when it really leads to harm. And that's really the biggest one, probably. So irrationality, basically. You could substitute the word irrationality for delusion, and I don't think you'd be too far off. And he says, yeah, this deluded person overcome by delusion does all these bad things, leads to their long-term harm and suffering. Okay. So is it enough then to say, so that's bad? No, he says, so what do you think then? Are those qualities skillful or unskillful? Well, they're unskillful. Are they blameworthy or blameless? They're blameworthy. Are they criticized by the wise? Yes. And so it's this. So he goes on and he says, all right, so what do you think? When a lack of greed arises in a person, is that for their welfare or their harm? For their welfare. Because, then they don't do all of those bad things that they would do out of greed. And the same thing with a lack of aversion and a lack of delusion. And are those qualities skillful or unskillful? Well, a lack of greed, the ability to be contented, the ability to as we did in the meditation, to react to a difficult person with kindness, the ability to see reality as it is, those things are skillful. Those are skills we should develop. But he doesn't leave it at that. He goes on and he explains, if you want these qualities that are skillful, here's how you do this. And he talked them through what we just did in the meditation, developing the Brahma Viharas. He says, one who's a disciple of the noble ones, in other words, one who's a follower of people who are really enlightened, devoid of greed, devoid of ill will, undiluted, alert, and resolute, pervades the first direction, the second direction, the third, and the fourth with an awareness imbued with goodwill. So just like we did, we sent out our wish for the happiness of all beings in all directions. And thus he keeps pervading above, below, and all around, everywhere and every speck, the all-encompassing cosmos with an awareness imbued with goodwill, abundant, expansive, immeasurable, free from hostility, free from ill will. So that's the first step. In developing this freedom from greed, freedom from delusion, freedom from ill will, from aversion, we develop goodwill. And then the next part, he says he pervades all these directions with an awareness imbued with compassion. the compassion. The Pali word is karuna, the desire for beings to be free from suffering. And then the next one, an awareness imbued with appreciation. So this one is really probably the most challenging to figure out exactly how to explain it. It's kind of the opposite of jealousy or resentment. When I have good fortune, I like having good fortune, and if we're aware of our good fortune, which this is an important thing too, because sometimes we have it and we don't pay attention to the fact that we have it. But if we have gratitude. Well, I like Jim. Jim has good fortune. I like that. So that feeling of recognizing, oh, this is Jim. What's happened good for you lately? What are you grateful for?
Well, and health in the family.
Okay, health. Good. So I see, oh, Jim, healthy family. So that's good. I'm happy for him. All right. So it's sort of like gratitude, but it's gratitude that includes other people and really other beings too. Because I see my dog is happy playing with, he just found a toy he forgot he had. Oh, he's very happy, and that makes me happy. Even seeing, this is weird, but I was driving down the street and there were some very happy looking buzzards. They had some very good fortune. Now, it was not good fortune for whatever it was that they were eating. It was good fortune for the buzzards. And I'm glad that they're getting a meal. Compassionate for the meal that they're getting, but you know what I mean. So this is the antidote to a lot of resentment, to jealousy, to those kinds of things, is to be aware of the good fortune of others and that it's a good thing. In Buddhism, a blessing is the result of your goodness. Usually you think of this term blessing as, some holy person who's a little closer to God than me came along and sprinkled me with water and blessed me, and now everything's good. It's different in Buddhism. Our blessings are the results of our good actions. And so even though we use water and blessings in some Buddhist ceremonies, but the water represents our merit. It represents the result of our goodness. It's just a reminder that you did something good. So when you bathe the baby Buddha, you're spreading your merit around. So anyway, when you do that, you can develop that as a skill to recognize the good fortune of others and be glad for them. And then finally, equanimity. Equanimity is a different one. Equanimity means I can see the ups and downs without losing my mind. I recognize that fortunes rise and fall, and I can ride the waves on that without capsizing my ship, my internal ship. And so that's equanimity. He said, imbue the four directions with equanimity, acceptance, accepting things as they are. Doesn't mean that we have to, just go with whatever. It means that we can accept where we are without falling into greed, without falling into aversion, without falling into delusion. And so he says all of this, and then he says, all right, Palamas, what do you think of that? And they say, oh, magnificent. Of course they did. The Buddhists wrote this down, so of course they're going to say it's magnificent. Just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to show the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp into the dark so that those with eyes could see forms, in the same way as the Blessed One made the Dharma clear. And then they all went for refuge. So that's the Kalama Sutra. It's one of my favorites. There's so much good Buddhism in there, so anyway, I hope that was helpful to you. And it's on Access to Insight if you ever want to read it. It's in its entirety. What time is it? Oh, a few more minutes. Any questions or comments?
What was monk or Zen monk accused of to be in prison?
So first of all, he became a monk in prison.
Okay.
So he wasn't a monk who got sent to prison. Yeah. And he's been in there for a really long time. and it was his rap sheet was pretty long when he got sent out. It was not a long criminal career, but it was quite an active one in a short period of time.
I thought he was a monk and Ash.
No.
That's fair.
He was in South Florida. I can't remember the institution down there. And there was a guy down there named Mitchell Cantor, who ran the Southern Palm Zen Center and was going in there and meeting with the guys. And they had apparently a pretty active Zen community, and he really latched onto it. And so they ordained him. And I think they don't really like that in prisons, you know, but somehow or another they got away with it. So anyway, he's been a monk for like 20 years. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you would say that the last part we were talking about, it's kind of like maybe like pluses and minuses that everything kind of has. I would get it that, you know, like for instance, someone gives you a whole bunch of one kind of food, it's a plus because you've got a lot of it, but there's also a minus that you're going to get bored eating the same thing for a long time. So kind of the same thing. Maybe?
Yeah, that's one of those delusion ideas. Okay, and I use the example a lot of time of like Black Forest cake. I love Black Forest cake, but I'm lactose intolerant, right? So I eat very much of it. I suffer from it. And that first bite, oh man, this is so good. I could just eat a ton of this. But the more the more you eat, right? And funny thing, the way the brain is wired, we're actually wired to kind of get used to things. So the first bite of anything could taste really good, and then the second bite can still be pretty good, but not as good. And by the time you've eaten a pound of it, it's not so much anymore. It's so, and that's true with many things. The first time is good, and then it sort of tapers off. So if you look at something and go, well, that's my path to happiness. If it's something that's going to diminish its ability to reward you over time, then that's delusional, basically. That's a delusion. So yeah, good point. Anything else? All right, we can do the 4 vows. Creations are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to transform them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The enlightened way is unsurpassable, I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to transform them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The enlightened way is unsurpassable, I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to transform them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The enlightened way is unsurpassable, I vow to embody it. Friends, I respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by, and opportunity is lost. Each of us must strive to awaken. Awaken, take heed, do not squander this life. Please stand and face the altar. 3 vows. Out of the teacher, out of each other. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here too.